Hey everyone, welcome back to Unfinished Festival, the third day today. It's so great to have you all back here on this Sunday morning. I'm Lauren Celenza, and I'm so happy to be here with you all again today. And today we're going to have a conversation that I find to be really special, called Vulnerability as a Creative Channel. And I'm going to be having this conversation with my close friend, Ramona Todoca. Ramona Todoca is a designer and creative director at Wieden and Kennedy. Born and raised here in Romania, she spent her 20s working in New York City and now enjoys her 30s living in Amsterdam. For more than a decade, she's been zigzagging between design and advertising in an attempt to transfer knowledge between those two worlds and make work that shifts and shapes culture. Ramona and I first met at art school in the US at Savannah College of Art and Design, also known as SCAD. We were both studying graphic design. We were both kind of rivals at the time, and our rivalry eventually turned into a blossoming friendship. And we spent time together in Hong Kong, where we studied for a little bit of time at the Hong Kong SCAD campus. And it was quite an interesting time because I was 21 years old at the time. I was living in the US. I come from a rural part of the US, and I was flying internationally to Hong Kong, all the way on the other side of the world, by myself for the first time, and I felt incredibly scared and terrified and vulnerable, and it was fantastic to have a friend there with me to really just make me feel at home and to find creativity in the midst of vulnerability. So without further ado, please welcome to the stage Ramona Todoca.
Hi everyone, Radmiatsa.
Hi, Ramona.
Hi.
So good to see you again. So I want to start out with something that we both have in common. Our work is very different, but one thing that I've noticed that we have in common about both of our work is that we're able to cultivate a multidisciplinary practice. You're a creative director, you're a designer, you do lots of different things. You lead teams. I like to design, I like to write. I also try to lead teams as much as I can as well. And, you know, cultivating that multidisciplinary practice can be quite difficult in a capitalist system, right? And with the pressures of the workplace where, you know, our skills may be flattened into one thing or one expression or one discipline, and we're often not allowed to actually express the fullness of ourselves and all the different types of skills that we may have.
Right.
So how have you come to understand what being a multidisciplinary person means, and what challenges have you faced with becoming a multidisciplinary person?
Great question. I feel like society, as you said, capitalism, society, people, job descriptions, they all like to put you in a box. They want to say, this is the job title, this is the question is, what do you do? Who are you? And people tend to only expect a single answer. A doctor, an architect, a mother, a singular thing, a singular box they can put you in, they can label you. And I find that incredibly difficult because I think we are different things at different times in our lives. We change, we evolve, and the first time I became aware of it was quite early when I was in high school. I was really into art history, but at the same time, I was also very much into the practice of art. So I was faced with choosing between two things I loved quite dearly, between art and art history, and to me, design was a way of not making that choice. Design was a way to marry those two things, to marry the concept and the craft, the expression of art, and the thinking and the message that goes behind it. But then as I found myself in college, I felt like by choosing the one thing, design, I was again faced with the same dilemma when I discovered that design is and can be many different things. Can be motion, can be printmaking, can be digital, can be many other things. So then again, I felt like I didn't want to commit to a single thing. And I continue to be curious and to explore the many facets of design. And I think to the recent time right now, and throughout my career so far, I was evading choosing the singular label, the singular thing, and not a single time I've been asked, "Are you a designer? Are you an art director?" But in a way, I felt like it's really important to not commit to the thing, to bring from one discipline to the other, and because I find like the most exciting and the most interesting things happen in between, at the borders between disciplines, when you are combining the many facets of your many interests into what you do and transcend that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think it's okay to not expect a workplace to offer everything to you, like if it's not going to give the ability for you to expand all these skill sets, that's okay. Use that for whatever you need to do to make a living, and then carve out the space if you can to create this other multidisciplinary aspect. And I think that's an important part of it, is finding that space wherever we can.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think everyone's talking about the main hustle and the side hustle.
Yeah.
And I see them as a main hustle and another main hustle, and sometimes they can interchange.
Cross. Yeah. And maybe you can have everything, but maybe you can't have everything all at once. That's okay. It's okay. It's okay to relieve that pressure from ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into the real stuff. When was the last time that you felt vulnerable in your creative work?
Wow, it's actually quite recently. I felt it's a different kind of vulnerability. So I'm always coming up with 2 years working at White & Kennedy in Amsterdam, and I recently realized that it was the first time in my life when I have no plan B. Usually I would get a job, and as soon as I would get a job, I would always be open for, what's next, what's going to be my next step. I was already plotting the next thing, and I wasn't quite living and fully immersing myself and fully being in that moment, in that job, or in that particular title and so on. And I realized a few months ago that this is the first time when as I said, I don't have a plan B, because I am so into it and so committed to it, and I feel like I'm creatively at home, that I'm not looking for anything else right now. I feel like I want to deepen the practice versus thinking again, what's next? And at the same time, I felt incredibly vulnerable, because that's exactly when things can go wrong. It's kind of like being in love, when you're so into that person and so all consumed with the relationship or the feeling of now how it feels to be in love, that you can be completely blindsided if something happens. So it felt vulnerable, but at the same time, it was a choice for me at that point to lean further in and to see where it goes, and to, for once, just live and sit in it and enjoy it, and not continuously think about what's going to be next. So that was quite powerful, but at the same time quite scary. And sometimes I'm thinking, what if I should actually think about a plan B?
I think that is a very vulnerable moment. What I love about that is you're living in the present moment. You're not worrying about what do I have to do next? What is that plan B? It's good to be prepared, right, in some cases. But what I also love about that is just the fact that whether it's a good experience or a bad experience, you're living in the present moment of that. And there is a vulnerability in that. But the beauty in that also is that you're able to live life fully.
Right.
You have the full experience of it.
Yeah.
I think when I look back on my own life, the moments where I may feel like, oh, I wish I would have done that maybe a little differently, or the moments where I wasn't fully present in the moment and I was worrying about the next thing, and then the thing that I was doing faded away or time passed, and I looked back and I thought, oh my gosh, I wish I would have just been more present in that moment and experienced it fully so that I could take that lesson with me.
Exactly.
And I think that really is the true meaning of vulnerability in a sense.
Yeah, it's really feeling it and really sitting into that experience and the feeling, for sure. Yeah.
So in your work as a creative director, the process of pitching an idea or a concept is one of the most vulnerable aspects of your work, and yet it's something that you do on a regular basis. And when a brand or company comes to you and says, hey, we're struggling to connect with a particular audience, or we have this business problem that needs to be solved, We want you to pitch us an idea to figure out how to solve it. They're coming from a place of vulnerability too, right? It's a high stakes moment. Money's on the table. They need to solve this problem. You're feeling vulnerable because you want to deliver a great pitch and not lose this client. So it's a vulnerable experience for everyone involved. What conversations are you having with yourself about the risks of pitching a bold idea to a client that may not be aligned with it, and how do you weigh the risks of potentially losing a client in the process of that?
Yeah, I mean, this is where vulnerability starts to become capital V vulnerability, because money is involved and jobs are involved and livelihood. But if we go to the bottom of it, the creative process is obviously a really vulnerable space. Is creative teams coming together, designers, art directors, writers, and bringing forth ideas. And obviously it starts at the micro level at the level of the team, people are pitching ideas to each other, and then it extrapolates to the larger relationship between, let's say, design agency or advertising agency pitching their collective ideas to the client. And I think you're right. When a client comes in for a pitch, they're in a vulnerable state of mind as well, because they realize that whatever they're doing now or whatever their needs are not met, it's not working out. And they come to us with a problem. They come to us with a business dilemma, business vulnerability. And I think in that moment, it's really important to meet in the middle and to acknowledge each other's spaces in the first place, between obviously agency or creative team and the client, and not lose sight of the fact that when we focus too much on this vulnerable space, or like quickly fixing it or quickly addressing it, quickly solving the problem, we can lose the opportunity to go beyond the solution that's required right now. Because pitches are also playgrounds. They are the only time when, as a team or as an agency, we go to the table with some sort of an innocence, some sort of playfulness. We are not so close to the client or so close to their problems. We're not, in bed with them yet. So because of that, there is a bit of a space that allows for the kind of creativity that they actually need to flourish, because you're operating from a space of not knowing. And that's really, really important to preserve. So I would say the questions I'm asking myself is this solution, is this idea, is this campaign, is this the solution to their problem, is this something that they have asked for, or is this something that goes beyond that? Is this something that solves the problem in front of us, or is that something that will solve the problem beyond that? And pitches are great for that, because it's a space, as I said, where you can come with the boldest ideas, and you can really set the tone for the relationship that is about to happen. And when I say pitch, I mean in a micro sense, when it's a designer and a client, or a designer and whoever they're designing for, but also at a macro level when it's about an agency talking to a big C client, C for corporate, I guess. So I think it works the same way, and it's really important to preserve that innocence and to preserve that playfulness, even if you are in a vulnerable situation of trying to impress someone, trying to win a business, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing in that too is, like, in the moment of stress and pressure and vulnerability, it's easy for all of us to become short-sighted. And we lose the ability to sort of come up with bold ideas or dream or feel the expansiveness of imagination and innovation. And it feels like a lot of your work is sort of working with people to help them remember that it's okay to dream. And here's what that looks like, and here's options, for what we could do with this. Do you find that to be true in your work?
Yeah, I'd say that's my favorite part. That's what keeps me going. That's what it's basically creating that space for the others to come in and fill it with their ideas, and also giving them belief that it's possible to continue to do so in the face of adversity, because it's not easy. Obviously, it's not something that people do, willingly. Usually, the creative process happens spontaneously, for in a rather private space. But I think when we bring it to the business space, the creative process becomes quite public and and that vulnerability and that the ability to come up with the ideas every day, to go through the creative process almost on demand.
Yeah.
It's taxing. It takes a lot, and I think people need leaders and people need others that allow for that space to happen for them to and allow for the conditions to happen for them to continue doing their practice, to continue to bring it every day. Despite of how difficult it can be sometimes.
Yeah, so important. So a couple months ago, we were messaging back and forth about how time and the cycle of trends in culture plays a critical role in understanding culture. Mm-hmm. And, for example, you do a lot of creative work for Samsung, mm-hmm. and you recently did a campaign for Samsung flip phones. So not smartphones, but flip phones, going back to that. And, flip phones are kind of making a comeback among younger generations across the world, offering kind of a sense of novelty and excitement, and sort of, kind of going against the status quo of smartphones, while also providing a sense of familiarity and nostalgia and kind of comfort amid a lot of technological uncertainty, I think, that's going on right now. My hope is that these cycles that we're seeing, especially with technology, kind of inspires a greater consciousness in the way that we engage with our devices, our flexibility in the way we use them, and also our restraint. And flip phones are interesting because they have this kind of restraint aspect. You close it, right? It's not always open. Obviously no one can predict the future, but as a creative director, how do you try to discern what's a lasting cultural moment versus a fleeting one? Or is this really about sitting in the discomfort of not knowing?
I think it's absolutely sitting in the discomfort of not knowing. I think the nature of culture is that it ever evolves, it changes by the minute, it shifts, and I think one of the most important things as a creative director and also as a creative person is to immerse yourself in the culture of every day. And when I speak about culture, it's not necessarily big C culture, art, museums, dance, theater, which is absolutely critical, mm-hmm. obviously, for my practice, but also in observation and listening. I think at this festival we talked a lot about listening, we talked a lot about silence, we talked a lot about just sitting there, being in the moment, and truly understanding what's around you. So I think that being attuned to culture is really important. It's probably more important than trying to discern, is this a real thing? If it exists, it's a real thing. Someone thought about it, someone felt mm-hmm. it. So, and I think if it gathers enough scale, obviously, then it becomes part of the mainstream. It becomes adopted by brands. Or I guess I would say co-opted in capitalistic purposes. It becomes, and we call this brands joining the conversation. But I think it's really important to find a way to truly join the conversation as a brand or as a creative with culture versus copy pasting something mm-hmm. that people love and just putting a logo on it or appropriating culture for the purposes of just selling more stuff. Mm-hmm.
How do you go against that current? Because that sort of pressure to copy or appropriate something can be pretty strong in the urgency of capitalism.
I think it's mostly always when I see, let's say, ideas or when I see ideas that maybe are veering into that, I think the question is this really how people feel, or is this really true? Mm-hmm. And just because it happened once, or just because is this really authentic? Would this be an authentic thing for the X brand to do, or is this just a brand inserting themselves into the conversation? Right. I think we all know how that feels when we have a conversation. Someone comes in, and I think at a larger scale, it just works against what we're here to achieve. So, mm-hmm. It's not always clear, but at least I think it should be a focus in any creative act to participate into culture and contribute to culture versus co-opting it or adopting it in order to sell more stuff.
Yeah, I love that sort of shift to contribute and listen. Back to the theme of silence, listening to culture as opposed to co-opting it. And I think that's a current that we have to resist. Yeah. That's where the vulnerability can often come in. So in terms of leadership, you're a creative leader, you lead teams. What have we misunderstood about vulnerability in leadership?
Everything, I say.
Yeah.
I think.
How much time do we have?
How much time do we have? I think we thought vulnerability has no space in leadership. I think historically, a leader would show up in the room and say, "This is the answer. This is the way forward. This is what we're doing." And those kind of people rose to the top. Those kind of people were the ones that were, revered and recognized. And what I found in my practice is that vulnerability is actually critical to being a leader. It's stepping into that room and when you don't know, acknowledging that you don't know, but committing, I think as Alicia said yesterday, committing to finding out together, committing to solving it together. And I think when you're vulnerable, obviously you're a lot more human for everyone in the room, therefore also a lot more accessible and a lot more, you create that space for people to open up and to bring their ideas and to allow for the creative process to happen. Now, I think there's a really also fine line, because if you are vulnerable all the time, it's really difficult to inspire belief. And I would say the vulnerability and belief are probably the two sides to the same coin of leadership, of a certain flavor of leadership, where you can be vulnerable, but your belief should never waver. Your belief is what inspires people to continue to show up. And your belief that you will, no matter what happens, you will get to the point. You will find the answer. You will complete the task. The project will be finished. And I find that really, really important. And I think for me, that belief comes, for better or for worse, comes really natural. It's a form of hope. It's a form of just knowing that even as you're kind of like heading to the edge of the cliff, you believe in the fact that you will land it until the very last minute. I found that really important. Equally important is showing vulnerability and showing that you walk into a room not having all the answers, yet you walk in the room with a belief that you will find them, and that most importantly, that you will find it together. And that has been really very enriching to experience.
Yeah, the belief and the trust in the teams that you work with, too. I think that's what's really been misunderstood as well, is there's this sort of mandate to direct reports or teams versus I trust you to do the work. I believe in not just the project and that the project will be successful, but I believe in you as a person. And that's the kind of leadership I think allows us to thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I believe in you, and also I believe in our collective force. I think you said something about trust, and I guess I never thought I'm going to quote my mom, but when I was a teenager, I really loved the one thing that she would do when I would go out at night. The last thing she would say is, "You have my 100% trust." And that was super powerful, because it was about protecting that trust versus about gaining that trust. And I like to, when I work with people, I like to operate from the same space of 100% trust. That feels more empowering than the effort it takes when you start with someone at 0 trust and you have to build it up. So, yeah, shout out to mom.
Shout out to mom. Speaking of which, I want to first recognize that we're sitting in a space today with 2 women, us together. Going back to what Dario said last night, divine feminine, I'm so excited that we've been able to have this space to just be ourselves. And in addition to being a creative leader, you're also a mother. How has raising your daughter, Maya, influenced your creative process? And, how conscious is your desire to pass down the values about creativity that were passed down to you?
Yeah, funny we talk about this because I feel like being a parent is probably one of the most vulnerable things a human person can do, a human can do. At least for me, it's been one of the most vulnerable experiences. But answering your question, I feel like to me it's not very dissimilar from the things that happen with the teams that I work with, where my intention is to create that space. For her as well, I feel like my intention walking into this experience, this wild and hard and beautiful experience of parenthood, is to create that space for her to grow into, and for her to discover, and for her to fill with curiosity, versus imposing some sort of an agenda or trying to pass down my interest, because I feel like I didn't really have a child to fulfill my unfulfilled, dreams or interests, but rather I wanted to have a child to see what kind of learning this experience could bring and what kind of growth could be for me as well. I guess it sounds a bit selfish, but it's true. And yeah, I think the intention is to create that space for her to grow, and to resist the urge to shape it in my image, which is not very interesting because we're all obviously unique.
Absolutely. Let's open it up to the audience. So if you have questions, raise your hand and we will pass a mic your way. Any questions for Ramona? Yes, I see a question here.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you very much for the insights you provided in this conversation.
Sure.
It's very useful, at least for me. I took some learnings. I'd like to ask you further, how do you deal with uncertainty in your job? Because ideas, as I perceive them, are a soft side of us, are not very something very tangible, something that we rely upon every day, and yet we still need to deliver them. We still need to finish the project and do what needs to be done.
Great question. I see uncertainty as a space that you enter, and a space that you learn to be comfortable in the more you do it. And to me, it's similar to obviously not knowing, but at the same time, the more you exist in that space, the more you learn where uncertainty is a threat or uncertainty is needed to create that space. So obviously when we start on a creative journey or we start on a project, we never start with a finished idea of what it would be or what it needs to become. So I think you're right. It's not easy. It's not easy to stay for too long in that space. It can be really exhausting. But the way to operate in it is I think, from my perspective as a leader, is to prepare for the multiple scenarios, and to have a soft plan that obviously can change. But for example, a lot of times we have, we brief a single creative team to crack a brief, as we call it, to respond to the task or to the prompt. And you never know what they're going to come up with in the first review, in the second review, but you know that if by the second review things are not heading into the right direction, it's too much uncertainty to the deadline, so to speak. So having a plan for additional support, or having a plan, or being ready to step in, and being ready to augment the work, being ready to avoid, or as you get closer to the finish line, to avoid the layers of uncertainty and become more clarified, more certain. I think it's a skill set that you develop the more you do it. So in a nutshell, I think being comfortable with it at the beginning, having a plan to get to the certainty, and also knowing when you've been too far out into uncertainty that it's going to be, a train wreck. You're not going to get to the end, to the finish line. Is really important. It's a skill that you develop with time, I think. I'm still practicing it as well.
Thank you very much. Sounds like a very good plan. Thank you.
Everyday practice, for
Everyday
sure.
practice.
Other questions from the audience? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Hello. Hello.
Hi.
Okay. I was curious. I mean, of course, people coming to your agency, they do, or clients coming to your agency, they do accept a certain degree of risk, and they are open to very creative and crazy ideas. But I was wondering, what do you do to alleviate this tendency of people from the client side to play it safe? Because they feel vulnerable. I mean, they're not that open to taking risks personally. So, and there's a second part of it.
I love second part.
I can see this tendency in client service a lot to mirror the behavior of the client side. So they tend to also play it safe because they know the client, that's his level of risk-taking. And what do you do to alleviate this tendency in your client service, if any, in your workplace? Thank you.
That's a great question.
Great question. I'm going to go back to dating for just 1 second. But to me, it's like going on a date with someone and trying to be what you think they want you to be versus trying to be who you are. But being closer to, I guess, the agency world, to your first question, the way we typically address that is by showing a range of work. And the way, even in the structure of the presentation, we usually start with we call it the pitch theater or the deck theater, where you start with the idea they think they want, or we start with the most safe idea, and then as you progressively go through the presentation, you get to the wild ones, or to the ones that are more daring, or to the ones that are that you know are going to have a bigger impact. And as you go through the narrative arc of the presentation, you also amp up the enthusiasm and amp up the reasons why that is the better choice, and also really augment the creative argument with business arguments, or with culture arguments, with examples of maybe other brands taking the same leap and seeing their results. So obviously it's a bit of a education, for lack of a better word, but also it is a strategy into going into those kind of presentations with a range of work that allows them to, feel safe. Here's what you've asked for, but actually here's what you should actually do. So that's the recipe. We do this on every single round. And then when it comes to the accounts or the suits, or the people that think they know best, no offense to the accounts in the house, it goes back to my point about pitching, about the fact that is a really special place when you don't know enough. When you're entering into a creative relationship with a sort of innocence or a sort of unfamiliarity that allows you to make some guesses and operate from this space of not second guessing what we think they want. However, when you're deep into the relationship, deep into the creative marriage, what tends to be helpful is to explain to the account people the same kind of thought process that I went through on the deck, and to also build and cultivate that level of trust both ways in making sure that it's not that we need their, I guess, permission, but making sure that they also rally against the wilder ideas, and arming them with arguments to have the right conversations in the background with the clients to bring down the vulnerability and the anxiety, the amygdala overdrive, and inspire that belief that it will actually work better than what they feel it's safe. I hope that answered your two-part question. There was one more in the back, yeah.
Hi, and congratulations for your work. I was wondering if you're taking in consideration to integrate artificial intelligence in your creative work, and how? Thank you.
I was waiting for the AI question. Glad we got that elephant in the room acknowledged. I guess a two-part answer to your question. One, we use AI tools like Midjourney or Adobe Photoshop, which has become incredibly amazing in terms of the speed and the range of work that we can get out, and how fast we can get at visualizing ideas with AI. We use it very, very often, extending the backgrounds, to get technical, but we do use it. However, we don't use it to generate scripts. Obviously, we don't use it in the creative process when it comes to idea generation. It's something that I was talking to someone in my office hours yesterday, and maybe it's foolish, but it is my belief that yes, the AI tools are becoming increasingly precise. They're becoming increasingly sophisticated. But I think that what is going to be difficult, or maybe take a much longer time than we can expect, is for those tools, when it comes to creativity, to account for everything that's human about us, which is our randomness, our idiosyncrasy,
our vulnerability,
is taking into account the complexity and the richness of our experiences that cannot yet be quantified and cannot yet be defined. So maybe it's a romantic view on the AI, but I'm personally not worried about it. However, you want to keep your enemies close, or your friends close and the enemies closer. So I think it's really important for any creative practitioner to understand how it works and to understand the beast in order to be able to tame it, or at least to be able to smell it when it gets too close. So I hope that answers your question. And I think it's really important to talk about it and to continue to acknowledge its role in the creative process, and for us to continue to think about what is it that makes the human creative process unique, and to protect that, because that's basically all we have.
That's basically all we have.
Yeah.
Well, this was an enriching conversation, Ramona. You are an incredible designer, creative director, and human. And as a friend, I appreciate so much how you have always believed in me. So thank you so much. All right. Thank you, Ramona.
Thanks, everyone.